of coffee this morning. Let's go. Okay, I'm going to do the intro and then we'll get going.
Okay.
Well, hey there, friend, and welcome back to Not Your Mama's Bible Study. If you are here for the first time, y'all are in for a treat. If you are returning, guys, I'm so excited to introduce you to my friend, Bethny Ricks. She is with us today to help us dive a little bit deeper into our topic. This season, season 5, we are studying women of purpose. And so if you've been on this journey with us every few weeks, we're in God's word and we're studying a biblical woman of purpose. And then I get to throw in some of my friends, these women that are live women of purpose right now for today. That's how God works. He just throws us into where we're at in the time of history that we're in, and he never stops working. And I'm so excited to have this conversation with my friend Bethny. Hey,
I'm so happy to be here.
Oh my gosh, welcome to the podcast, friend. We are going to have a conversation today about women of purpose. But before we do that, why don't you just give them your regular, that podcast
spiel?
Give them the spiel, throw the spiel out.
Let's see. Who am I? I'm bottom of the barrel, y'all. Bottom of the barrel. She's like, whatever.
Okay.
I am, I'm a mother of 2 children, an 11-year-old and 9-year-old, a son and daughter. I am a former business executive, but I continue to work with large corporations, consulting and speaking. I'm an author, I'm a writer, I'm a strategist. I'm someone who helps other women kick the door in when it comes to self-doubt, understanding who they are in Christ. I got a lot of grit.
I got a lot of grit.
Love it.
I love your grit. It's actually one of my favorite things about you. I love how gritty you are. I love it.
Gritty.
So, because a lot of my friends don't know you, and
I'm a pretty unknown person.
I know.
Yeah.
Kind of just your journey. Can you tell a little bit? And then I'm gonna ask. We're gonna talk about being a woman of purpose. Can you just tell a little bit about your story, because you have such a dynamic story, and we each have our own story. But yours has taken a lot. You've taken a lot. You've been on a journey, friend. We've been on a journey.
Yeah. So we've been on a journey.
Tell a little bit about like how you got like beginning stages, kind of to where you are now, and just where's God in all of that? Where has God been? Like as you look back. You're about to turn 40. And
I am.
You're thinking about what's like God has taken you on. You've been on a journey. And I would love for them to just hear a little bit about, where you started and how you got to where you are now. Very different.
It is different. It is unique. I can see the breadcrumbs and, the pain and the trauma and the success. So I went to school for sociology and criminology, expecting to be a professor or go and be a lawyer. And I ended up in business, in HR. By the time right before I turned 30, I was named, so around the age of 30, but I was named senior vice president of global human resources with a team of over 100 across the world, making me one of the youngest executives in the country and one of the, if not the youngest African-American executive in the country for a C-suite organization or a publicly traded company. So that was an interesting ride. And the year that I was promoted to SVP is also the year that I was handed divorce papers. So I was married. She was like, I was married for 10 years. I'm pretty open about it now that my kids are older. I wasn't before, but it was an abusive marriage. And so at the time that I was kind of on this corporate climb, I had a lot of personal turmoil going on that people did not know about. So all the kind of different buckets of abuse, because some people are like, oh, well, what kind? All the buckets, y'all. And I learned a lot about the unwillingness of the church, not my local church, but Christians, to extend empathy without context.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So that was an interesting journey. And my goal at the time was to succeed my boss and retire at the age of 44, 45. That was kind of the goal because I became an executive so early. And then COVID happened. We were all at home, which means I was not traveling around the world. And all the stress of that kind of made me rethink what I wanted to do for the future. And I ended up having a TIA while I was rethinking what I want to do for the future. And for those who don't know what that is, that's kind of a warning shot that you're about to have a massive stroke.
Mm-hmm.
So I was hospitalized in 2020 and told that it was because of stress. Go figure. And then God just really started working on my heart and birthed Jesus-led Bible fed, which that was really interesting because I was in a corporate space and there's no space for God openly there. Like, we can just call a spade a spade.
Mm-hmm.
So I was kind of figuring out like, oh, that must be years down the road. And within 3 months, I had decided to leave. And so I did, and doors opened for me to do that. And then he told me to rest. And I think around that time I met you and some other women, and the rest is history.
It's so interesting when we talk about, I think sometimes
That's the super short version.
yeah, there's a lot in there. When I talk to women, because I think it's a gift that I get to like meet with women oftentimes face to face, and they're very vulnerable and they will share stories with me. And I think, and you've had the same experience. And even online, when, especially with the content that you produce, I think it wells something up in women. And so I think sometimes that they think pursuing my calling, being a woman of purpose, living for God is like like me,
Yeah.
I'm going to choose this, and then God's going to bless this, and then it's going to look like this, and then I'm going to be here at 50 and whatever, doing whatever.
Yeah.
But that's not the case. That's not the case. And so tell me a little bit, especially just from your reflective experience, what does when you think about, when I said, hey, we're talking about women of purpose, like, what do you think, like what, and I'm sure just like me, that definition has changed for me over as I've walked with God and I've had the experiences that I've had. So women of purpose, like, what is it? What do you think? What is a woman of purpose?
Whenever I hear that, my mind goes two places. One, it's man can give purpose. Now hold on a second for those who are like, give me a second. Man can give purpose to things. Like, man can invent things and say, this is what this is going to do. I think for us as women and women of God, we have to say purpose is connected to identity, because man can't give identity. I said what I said.
Right.
Right. So we have to like level set. This is the starting point. Purpose is connected to identity, and identity is given at birth. Mm-hmm. Right. God, he knew us in the womb. Right. He's that detailed. And so that means whatever your purpose is in Christ, it doesn't matter the environment. So for me, I'm called to lead. I've led in multiple environments. It has changed and the definition has expanded in some ways. In other ways, it's retracted. But when I look back at, even when I haven't always been a believer, even though my father's a pastor, I haven't always been a believer, that those parts of me have always shown up. Because it can't be, that's something that God gave me. Like, he gave me this grit. Like, no one's going to, snatch that away. So that's what I think of when I hear that and when I talk to women.
Absolutely. And I see that, like, I can see that in my own life, that that thread. And even when I wasn't pursuing God with my life, which was for a long stint, I can still see that. I call it, in my Bible study, I call it a gold thread. Like I can see
Yes.
how God just like wove things into me, wove himself into me, wove like, when I was standing in front of my mirror with a hairbrush and writing motivational speakers for my Barbies and all that, like I can see,
You're like, there it is.
well, there it is, or singing Whitney Houston's tape that I had at the top of my
Yes.
lungs. Like I just can see those things. And I think that we think it's so like, sometimes I think in church, we will teach like, God is just only in when you're pursuing him. God is just only in when you're reading your Bible or when you're active in your faith. But that hasn't been my story. Is like, God is the whole thing.
The whole thing.
It's just that I started responding differently to what God was doing in my life when I was
Exactly.
actively pursuing him, and how he created and made me and pursued me.
Yes.
Okay. So when we're talking about women of purpose, we're talking about, so like we're taking turns talking about different women in the Bible. And I really want to know, now I'm really excited because of what you said when we were getting ready, but uh, women in the Bible, like what women in the Bible do you identify with? Like what stands out to you? Woman of purpose.
So I don't have a traditional answer. It's the woman with the issue of blood.
Oh, that is so interesting. Tell me
And
why.
it's not because of her illness.
Sure.
It's because of the courage it took to reach.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I'm sure when she was reaching, she had doubts. She had been told that she couldn't be healed. And I've had many situations in my life where I doubted, I was in fear, I was angry. The chaos around me was keeping me from seeing. And I had to muster the strength to reach. And every time I did, God reached back.
Mm.
So anytime I read that story, anytime I hear that story, I think about the courage that it took. Yes, there's faith that it took also, but the courage that it took for her to reach
Mm-hmm.
and believe that he was going to reach back,
Yeah.
that there
And
was
not
something
slap
was
her
going to happen.
hand.
Yeah, that something was going to happen on the other end of her stretching her arm out with whatever preserves she had of energy,
Yeah.
whatever she had. I mean, she had an issue with blood, which means she was probably lethargic. Like when we go back and truly study the illness of what she had, she was probably very tired. And we
Mm-hmm.
all know what that feels like, to just be tired and weary. And like, I don't know what to do. I'm at the end of my sapsucking rope.
Mm-hmm.
And so we have just enough left to reach.
Right.
And he reaches back every time.
Absolutely.
There is no other woman in the Bible I identify with most. And she shows up throughout my teenage years, my 20s, my 30s, and even now when God is calling me to do something. And I'm like, I think of her.
Yeah.
And I identify with that.
My goodness. That was just so good. That's such a good answer. We could just stop now.
You're like, and we're done.
That's
and
it.
we're
That'll
done.
preach. And now
Yeah.
I'm gonna go meditate on that. So, but like so much bravery on her part.
Oh,
Show up to that. So much
to
bravery.
to press through the
Yeah.
crowd.
Right. And she
Yeah.
was and for my girls, we have not studied this. And so some of you are like, what you talking about? Woman
Yeah.
who and a woman with what? So she had some sort of illness, some sort of chronic, we don't know what. I don't think we're told, but she had bled and bled and bled for I don't remember if it mentioned the time, but years.
Years. It says years. It doesn't say
Yeah.
how many.
And she and really what I don't think we understand in the cultural context is she, like, when you were bleeding, you were unclean. So you could not
Correct.
be you're not supposed to be out in public. You're not supposed to be around anybody. No, you're not supposed to touch anybody because you are I think religiously unclean is what that had something to do with religion because it was a bleeding issue and
Yeah.
health issue. So they were not allowed to be around. So she was probably just ostracized.
Yeah. Doctors couldn't help her.
Nobody
And
could
so
help.
that sometimes it takes courage and we have to fight
Yeah.
for our peace.
Right.
Sometimes we got to fight for it. And she was fighting
Mhm.
for not only healing, she was fighting for peace in her mind.
Mhm.
Bible doesn't say that, but we can all put ourselves, this is what I love about, reading the Bible, is because I can see myself in the stories. And so I have been sick and I have, been hooked up to tubes, and yeah, I needed to be healed, but I needed peace in my mind.
Mhm.
I was fighting for peace. That's hard to do. It's hard to do, to fight
Absolutely.
for peace, to just be like, I'm going to do this, and I'm not going to let anything else pierce my peace.
Right.
That'll preach now.
Yeah. Because we live in a chaotic world with chaotic
Mhm.
systems, with chaotic minds. And so absolutely. So
Yeah.
Jesus walks through and she just touches the
And
cloth of his.
he's healed. And he looks at her. Well, he says, for those who don't know the story, he said, "Who touched me?" And the disciples are like, "There are tons of people around. Like, what are you talking about? There's so many people." He's like, "No, who touched me? He felt something leave him." And he turned to her and said, "Your faith has made you whole," I believe is what he said. But in that story, it was what it took for her to reach. And it's not even being overly spiritualized. There are instances, no matter what type of success you achieved or how great your marriage is, or there are aspects of our life where it's just like, what the heck is going on?
Mhm.
You know,
Yeah.
and you have to choose between staying stagnant or reaching. Because sometimes we're not called to take steps.
Right.
Because everyone's like, oh, the first step is hard. Sometimes you're called to be still and maybe just reach your hand out.
Mhm. And you had a season of that.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. You walked that season, at least I know of one. And then you were very still in a writing, you were doing some writing.
Yeah.
And you had some stillness and some boundaries around that. And so I see you actively doing that. That's good. I think we're afraid to be still.
Oh, God, of course. Of course. Because there's a lot coming at us, telling us to move. And I'm not saying like move in terms of moving your body, but the activity, right? The constant activity, instead of resting in stillness and listening. And yeah, I did it. And it resulted in me being in the hospital. So, I'm not acting like I learned my, and when I left my job, I immediately got calls from bigger corporations, and God was like, "No, you're going to sit your happy mess down." And that took me about 6 months. So it wasn't like oh, yes, yes, Lord. Like that was a hard thing to do in a world that's saying your value equates to doing.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. What can you get done today and every day for the rest of your life until you die?
And then show it to us. So prove it to me.
Right.
Show me what you're doing, and then I will assess value.
Right. I will tell you if this is a valuable work you're doing or not.
Yeah. Who cares what God says?
Right.
We will decide if this is value. We will decide whether or not you should do this long term.
Mm-hmm.
Like, oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
How hard was that to fight that? And then I'll move on to the actual
Oh
question.
no. Yeah, we can talk about whatever you want.
Talk
Yeah,
a little bit about how hard it was to fight. Like you had to retrain your brain, which I think a lot of women listening, because I know I have some, big time CEOs here that listen. I know that I have some stay-at-home moms that listen. I know I have some women that are grinding to make it up the ladder.
Yep.
How hard? So, because I've seen you wear some very big, worldly important hats
Yeah.
and pursue that and go from that to really, wearing a hat where you're figuring it out with God. Like maybe there was no hat. Like you're just, okay, God, like what's the next thing I'm supposed to be doing? How hard was it to how hard is it to train your brain to like find value through this work that you're doing now when there was so much there was awards and financial gain and all this stuff on the other side of it? Like that's a multiple personalities. Like how
It
was that?
is. It was difficult because I had been rewarded. It wasn't as though I walked away. I walked away at the peak of my career. I had been named, and then the following year, even after I left, I received the award for the second year, most influential African American woman in business. So it was kind of one of those like, oh, did I hear right, God?
Mhm.
However, it's back to identity. And so for me, I had to remember what was important and what I was working towards, which is I was working towards peace. And so to help me do that, I have very strong boundaries. I know what I will say yes to, and I know what I will say no to. A lot of times people tell you, like, well, know what you're going to say no to. Well, you need to know what you're going to say yes to, which is like, well, isn't that obvious? If you make a list of like all the no's, that everything else will be yes. Well, no, not necessarily. And so there are certain things that I started doing even before I left the corporate space where like I'm not working on the weekends. I sit on boards where I'm not working on Saturday and Sunday. So y'all can have your board meeting. I'm not coming on Saturday.
Mhm.
So I started creating space for myself. And then God and I had to work out the trust issue because I was like, really though? And the question that he asked me was, have I ever dropped you?
And what was your
No,
answer?
no, he hasn't. He's never dropped me. Ever. Now, have I stepped outside of his hand and jumped off the cliff?
Yeah.
Yes. Because I thought my way, but he's never dropped me.
Yeah.
And so there's a trust factor there. And in the corporate space, you have to navigate, showing up as a Christian and just, being present in that way, which you don't necessarily vocalize. It's just your presence is enough. And
Mhm.
then, kind of creating those boundaries. If that answers your question, I think it does, but
No, it does.
maybe not.
It does. So just kind of on that same vein, then how would you say that a woman can embrace her purpose? It's because also I think what we have figured it out, but also throughout this, as we've journeyed throughout the season. And I had Jen on a couple weeks ago.
Love her.
I know I love that woman.
Yep.
But so we did talk a lot about, pursuing purpose, but how can a woman embrace her purpose? Because it's seasonal. I think that's what we're figuring out is like, I have a full purpose in God. And also there are seasons where it looks different. So how can a woman embrace, pursuing purpose, even when
Um,
it looks different in different seasons?
yeah, because there's growth, so it has to change, right? Because you're growing toward purpose is eternal. Um, I'm going to say something that is unconventional, but understand I'm saying it as a businesswoman.
Right.
So for all my business people on the phone who are like, um, to embrace it, the goal is not to monetize it. I think in 2023, if people can't monetize their purpose, then they disregard it.
Mm-hmm.
If it can't be platformed, because we're told that that's what you're supposed to do. And then for some people, that's not what they're supposed to do. Their purpose is used, outside of that for that reason. And they fall into the trap of comparison. Well, this person has a podcast. my purpose is this. How do I turn it into that? That's not, so I want to free somebody in that. Like, so to embrace it, don't start there.
Right.
Right. Don't start there. And I talk to women who do that. They're like, well, I'm not sure if that's what I'm supposed to do because I don't know if I can write a book about it. Like, who said you're supposed to write a book? Like, who said you're supposed to write a book about it? Like, you don't have to write a book about it. So I think that's the first thing. Talk to God. I think I believe if we look at where we're naturally bent, don't resist the natural bend. The things that you love. If you love music, if you love crafting, if you love drawing, painting, if you love speaking, if you love writing, and that's something that's always been in you, then you need to start pressure testing it. I mean, the other thing about purpose is you don't just walk into it. People want to jump into, I'm going to give you guys an analogy. People want to jump, take the leap of faith, right? We hear that all, like, I didn't take the leap of faith. Very rarely should we be taking leaps. When you think about an ocean, for those of you who've been on the ocean, been out to the ocean, to get to the deep water, you have to walk. You start at the shallow end of any beach, any lake. And if you're on a beach and you're walking out to the deep end, waves will come, you turn your body, you pivot, regain your footing, you feel the sand shifting underneath your feet, you take in a breath and you go again. And then finally, when you get to the right area, you plug your nose and you go under. So we should think about purpose in the same way. Start on the shallow end and then walk at the appropriate pace. And when the waves come, the challenges come, uncertainty comes, the sand starts shifting underneath your feet, you turn, regain your footing, focus on where you're going, and keep moving forward. And that for some people may take years. I'm going to be 40. I didn't really have my arms around helping other people achieve their well done until 2 years ago. God didn't reveal that to me until 2 years ago.
Yeah.
And then I can look back and go like, oh, well, that makes sense. I have the gift of gab. I got a whole lot of grit. I'll kick in doors. I'll help people figure out what's in them and how to apply it in their everyday life. Oh, makes sense.
Right. But could you have done that before? I think what I'm doing now, I don't know if I could have done it the way that I'm doing it if it was 10 years ago, because I didn't know what I knew. And it's important I know what I know in order to do what I'm doing.
Yes. I mean, I have a different level of empathy for people because of what I went through personally. And it's like, oh yeah. So I lead a very different way than what I did 15 years ago.
Yeah.
I was a hard knock. I was a knucklehead leader in the beginning. I didn't end up that way, but how am I going to help other people achieve their well done? And I'm sitting here barking at them. That didn't work. Or positioning myself as better in their life. So you're going to help people by telling them that I know better. Right. I know better for your life. What?
Yeah. Yeah, you got to go through your things.
Got to go through the pruning.
Oh, pruning. Man, I pruned my rose bush this weekend and I thought, this is exactly it. This is the way it is. Because first off, that was not fun.
No, never
In my
is.
next
You always
life,
get
I'll have a landscaper that does that, but I didn't have that. That's not my story right now. So I was pruning my rose bush this weekend and I thought, man, now I understand, like when the Bible talks about this is terrible. And you're cutting off pieces that are good, but they're not going to grow the way that they are. You've got to cut them back and cut off all the old stuff sometimes to make it, so the bush looks tiny right now, but it's going to grow.
Yeah. And also people.
Mm-hmm.
So it doesn't, there are people who were in my life 4 years ago that aren't in my life now for really good reasons.
Yeah.
And then there are people who, we both know Jen. I'm sure some people on the podcast know her or listen to her. Jen has been a very vital part of my life in this new chapter, right? I didn't know Jen 3 years ago.
Yeah.
Right. But it's like, oh, okay. So it, and I was ready for that. I was in a place for that. So yeah, I think just when you guys are thinking about your purpose, think about the beach and going into the deep water.
Slowly but surely.
Slowly but surely. And there's some parts you might run,
Yeah.
because you're like, oh, I feel okay. I feel good.
I feel ready. See, I'm like looking for sharks. You called me into the deep water. I'm gonna look for sharks again, like delayed obedience, friend.
Like, ah!
Oh, you want me to go that deep? I don't do ocean life, so that's tricky for me. Okay, so same line. Where do you see Christian women getting hung up on this?
Hung up on which part?
Like embracing, like pursuing calling with God, embracing what God's calling.
Comparison. All the time.
Nasty thing.
It's compare and contrast, where they equate their value based off of what someone else is doing.
Yeah.
And they don't vocalize it. So I have, I tell women a lot, especially in leadership, there is a competition happening. That doesn't mean that you have to participate, and it doesn't mean you won't win. Other people will try to force you to participate. You really don't have to. Because when you're actually participating in a race, because I'm a runner, I ran track since middle school, you are comparing numbers, how fast you're going. So I struggle with that analogy sometimes. Like, I know how the Bible uses it, but we've really exaggerated. The race is not given to the swift. It's the comparison thing. It cripples women every single time. And for me, one of the things that I have to do, I am online. I'm working on a lot of different projects right now, so I'm not posting as frequently, but I will remove myself from the online space because it is the algorithm, and there are different things that force you to like, okay, well, you have to compete to be viewed, to get like you gotta, and I'm like, I'm not participating in this because I know who I am.
Right.
And by the way, I'm a bad mama jamma. And so are y'all. And so are y'all. That's not an ego. Yeah, that's not an ego thing. You guys should look yourselves in the mirror and say, I'm a bad mama jamma in my life. Yeah. In my life. Forget the metric.
My 2 feet are planted.
We're exactly right here. I'm what's up in my life. And it doesn't mean that you think you're perfect or that you are without flaw. But it's okay to encourage yourself and be like, you know what? I'm God's favorite.
That's right.
Come on, y'all. There's nothing wrong with saying like, I'm God's favorite. Because I'm his favorite too.
Right. And it applies to everything, like that comparison and that fight for who you are. Like, it doesn't matter where your 2 feet are planted. That's constant. Like, stay-at-home mom, you're comparing what other stay-at-home moms are doing or what working moms are doing, women that have careers outside. And then well, that's not you. That's not your call. That's not what you're called to. You're called to this. Yeah. It's going to look different. It's going to look different. And
it should.
It should.
It should. I was judged all the time as a mother because I was a working mom who traveled, and I would not make the cookies and cupcakes for her birthday. I would go to Whole Foods and buy them, and I felt no shame about it.
Yeah.
I'm like, are y'all paying a single bill?
No.
I don't think so. If you want to, you can.
Right.
But
that's right. So have you always been like this? You've been like this since I've known you, but
yeah, I mean, on the outside, absolutely. Absolutely. On the inside, I've struggled with self-doubt. I have struggled with, am I doing what I'm supposed to be doing? I've struggled with acceptance. I've dealt with falling into the trap of comparison and conforming and contorting myself to fit into a box. And God, he sat back and chilled and let me go through that and work that out on the inside, So on the inside, no, I haven't always been, I have walked on the thin ice. I think I've talked about this before. Self-doubt feels like you're walking on thin ice and you just don't trust what you're doing, what you're seeing, and your words and things like that. So yeah, I've absolutely been there. And especially when you have people, like, let's acknowledge there are people in our lives, in business, personally, who will also strip us down to the marrow with their words. And then it just reinforces the story that you're telling yourself in your head.
Yeah, that's the kicker. This is when it hits deep to the thing that is your, the fear of that you have about yourself.
Yes, somebody, they know my secret. They know my secret.
And it was right all along. You're like, that confirms what I felt all along.
Yeah.
Not good enough, not worthy enough, not pretty enough, not smart enough, not all those things, that thing. Yep. Yeah.
Yep.
Oh, and it can derail.
It can.
So if you're like thinking about, can you give some steps? Like, I know it's hard not to but you've done the work.
Yeah.
The process. So as somebody that I look at and I think, okay, she's on pursuit. Like, you're on pursuit with God. What are some steps that someone could take to start on that journey?
I'm going to give you guys a tagline. One is, you have to know who you are before people tell you. Now that's mine. Feel free to use it. Know who you are before people tell you. And that's really important, because even if for a moment you're derailed and someone says something and you feel worthless, at the core, you know who you are. So we always revert back to what we know. We will revert back to truth. And then the second is, who does God say you are? And there are the Bible verses, but what has he said to you? Sometimes you just need to remember. And then it's the question of, do I believe him? Do I believe that the God of the universe believes this about me? And oftentimes we will say yes. There have been some instances where I have said, I don't believe that. I don't believe that he loves me this much. And then I have to ask myself, why? And then you take yourself down that, well, because this is happening and this is happening and this is happening. Well, God is not a God of circumstance. He is a consistent God. And in the remembering, right, that thread that you talk about, in the remembering, we start to see his consistency. Then we connect it with I'm somebody where I will start to read the book of Psalms out loud and the book of Proverbs out loud. And it's just like, oh. And then I replace it, I put my name in. This is who he says Bethany is. Just do that one. Replace your name. Go to David when he's crying out and put your name there. Just 2 verses. You don't got to read a whole chapter. You don't have to be overly holy about it, but say it out loud so you can hear. And I guarantee you, by the time you get done with the second verse, you'll be crying, because you're crying because you remember how he has shown up for you. And then that doubt of his love for you will start to dissolve. And then you will remember who you are beyond what people say and how people do. You're like, no. This is who I am. This is who I'm called to be. This is how I'm showing up in my family. This is how I'm leading. You're talking, I'm a woman who I've been told that I can't do things because I'm divorced. But what did God say? What did God say?
Right. Because if we could do that, I think there would be such a shift. I think there's so much power in that. I think there's so much freedom in that. only because I mean, you've experienced it. I've experienced it. Like I couldn't have been better than the moment when I was like, oh, it's okay that this is how I teach. This is how I preach. These are the
I
things
am.
I say. It's okay that I'm bold. It's okay that I'm pursuing it this way. Not going to look the same for everybody else. It's okay for who God says I am,
Yes.
because you're just unleashed. I just think
You're totally, I mean, I dare someone to tell me what I cannot do for Christ. I double dog dare them. Double dog dare them. You go right on ahead. I'll put you in your place with a smile.
smiling and bless your heart.
But that one won't be pierced, because I've gone through the journey of, you are not going to shame me. You are not going to contort me. I will not bend and I will not fold. And I may fall, but I'm going to get back up and keep going. And the falling is the self-doubt, the fear, the anger, the weariness. That's what I'm talking about. And it happens. But at the end of the day, Christ is my leaning pole, not man, not the fickle man. Christ is my leaning pole. He is my place of comfort, an ever-present help.
That's so good. Just perfect. Like I hope that we can soak that in and take what God wants. Like that's a nugget for us, and a really good, just some really good points, you guys, for you to sort of journey with a little bit. Like this is work. Like this is some time. This is some pursuing of God. This is some pursuing of God's word and God's truth. Like it's not, I mean, I don't think it happens in one day. God can do anything, but
yeah, no.
this is, this is some counseling. This is some hard work.
Oh yeah.
Hard self-work. It's some hard work with God. And so a lot of times I think we run from the hard work. We don't want to do the hard thing.
Well, who wants to go through that pain? You know, yes, he has a tender hand, but he's also a very precise surgeon. So I always visualize myself as on a table, and, you know, God is redeeming and repairing. And I'm like, okay, you're done. And he's like, but I'm not though. And I'm like, yeah, but I'm sick of, like, I'm done. Like, I'm sick of talking about it. I'm sick of it. And he's like, but I'm not done yet. Because when I'm done, it's wholeness. It's not, there's no incompleteness there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Something that I really love when you post online is your family. I love your family. I love the way that your family, your siblings interact with each other. And I love videos of your parents. And I just think that that's so fun. I would love to hang out with them because it's just such a fun dynamic.
Oh, yeah.
And I can't help but think that maybe, and you can stop me if I'm wrong, but that maybe your grit and your fight and that has also been upheld by your family, that there's, so what did they do? Like, how did they raise you? You guys all are just so fun and so dynamic. You have this great relationship with each other. I mean, nobody's perfect. Like, I'm sure you guys have had stuff you've had to work through and complications in relationship and all that, but what did they do? Like, what did they do that you're mimicking when you're raising your babies and you're teaching them these things? And what did they uphold? Like, just as a parent, I just want to I want to sit down and be like, how do you guys do this?
Like, how did you do this with 5 children?
Oh,
with all
very dynamic and just big personality, and
So there are a couple of things they did. One, in not a transactional way, Christ was the center of the house, even though, we, like I said, I haven't always been a believer. So, but I came back to what I knew. And in part, I came back to what I knew because it was just a part of our life. And I say not in a transactional way, because it was just, how our house breathed. There is also a lot of laughter. our home was the place everyone came to, and there was a lot of joy, as much joy as you can have with a bunch of teenagers fighting.
Right.
You know what but it was a safe space. So my father, which is something I do with my kids, and my mother very much so allowed us to be the individuals that we are. So he knew before I did that I would be speaking. And so at dinner, he would present these arguments and I would counter argue. And he would let me get vocal and push back and it wasn't just about Bible, it was politics, it was what was going on. I mean, I look back now, I'm like, oh my gosh, he was totally preparing me for something he didn't even probably know, that I would be in boardrooms before the age of 30. But they really, just from an individual level, created space for us to pursue our talents, pursue our dreams, but we could also talk to them about anything. And so that's something that I'm doing with my kids. I've refined it a little bit, but home was safe and it was fun and I was grounded all the time. So I also said, my parents followed through with what they said. So that was the other thing. If we were in trouble, there was always follow through. It was like, oh no, you're really in trouble. They were never too tired for punishment.
Neither were my parents.
Yeah, it was that. So there was always follow through. They were consistent. It was a place of laughter and we did things together as a family, but we were also allowed to be kind of individuals. And that was just a breeding ground. And my parents say now they were praying for us. They were definitely praying for me, in the background. And God has shown up. God has shown up for sure.
Yeah. I'd like you guys to have a reality TV show.
That's what people say.
Like how can we make what petition do I have to sign? Like what letter do I have to write? Come on.
That's what people say. I mean, we are a lot of fun. They're all going to be here. Again, my baby sister lives in Charleston and my other sister lives in the Columbus area, but everyone's going to be here because my baby sister is pregnant and my brother, his wife, she's pregnant and they're due on the same day. So
I did not know.
Yeah, that's August the 19th. Fun. Yeah. So it's all baby showers this weekend. So it'll be fun. Good time.
So fun. You guys are so fun. How can we elevate women up and coming? Like what can we as women be doing as we're working through this purpose? Like how do you see this happening out? I don't know. I would say globally. Like what does it look like to elevate women as we pursue purpose collectively, separately? Like what does genuine elevation look like? Because I think it can be gross and I think it can be self-serving sometimes, but like when we think about like what does genuine elevation look like as women, like women to women? I mean, it's not that I don't care about men, but I'm not raising them, but
I spent a day at Abercrombie and Finch and we talked about, this was something that we talked about was women supporting women. And I will tell you all the same thing I told them, because I think it's consistent across any environment. Supporting other women means offering up their name so just because it's not right for you doesn't mean it's not right for somebody else. And in order to provide an alternate name, you have to know people.
Yeah.
So that's a twofold response. You have to put your ego out of the way and be able to say, like, this really isn't for me, but here's a person. And to be able to know if the person is right, you have to get to know people. You can't assume. Bias gets in the way a lot of times where we see something and then we just kind of assume that the person doesn't have the package or the skills. And that happens with me a lot. People, because I don't really put online kind of my history. And so it's like, oh, you're just a writer. And I'm like, oh, okay.
That's cute.
Yeah, that's fine. And then it's like, oh, okay. But I think for the people listening, it's the same thing with you all, where you're like, I can do so much more. And so I think making those connections and then other women offering I offer women up all the time because I'm in a season where I can't do a whole lot because
Mhm.
I'm working on some stuff. So it's like, oh, I'm not good for this, but this person is. And oh, and by the way, you don't have to tell them that I offered their name up because this isn't like a switch kind of thing where they need to come back and say, oh my God, thank you so much, blah, blah, blah. Nah, remove that from the equation too, by the way.
Yeah, that one.
Because a lot of times people will, I say a lot of times, which is a pretty grand statement, but I'm from a business perspective, I've seen it a lot, and I've seen it in the Christian space where I'll help you, but you have to help me later. So for me, to make sure I don't fall into that trap, I do a lot of things anonymous because really only God needs to know anyway.
And I've seen you live that out. So I love that. It's doable. It's good. That's good.
You and I making our faces without saying anything. We're like,
I know. Oh. If you want to see our faces, you're going to have to watch the YouTube because the faces really tell a big story.
Yeah, we're just like
a lot of story on this face.
Yeah. And I'm not thinking about anybody in particular. I'm just saying we can break cycles and we can help other women and be willing to allow other people to pass you.
Mm-hmm.
Be like, I'm going to have this person do this because they need to be trained up because one day they're going to lap me.
Yeah.
And be okay with that.
Right.
I want every single woman that I have ever mentored, who has ever followed me, whoever listens to me, I want every single one of them to lap me multiple times. Multiple times. And I'll be like, you go, girl. I'm tired. You go, girl. Hey, that's
tired.
You go, girl.
Oh, I want to be cheering you on, drinking my tea.
I'm walking. I'm over here building other tables. You go right on ahead. We really have to manage ego because my ego has gotten in the way a whole lot of times where I've been silent, where I'm like, oh, this person would be so good for this. And I've gotten silent because I'm like, but then they'll realize that they're better than me. And especially when money's involved. My God.
Then it gets real big. Oof.
Yeah, I don't mind telling them myself. There are many times where I was silent because I was like, oh, they're really good. And oh my God, let me just hide them over in the cut, not tell anybody.
Yes.
She said yes.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm just the person who's willing to admit that I've done it so that people can look in the mirror and see if they've done it and course correct.
Mm-hmm. Right. That's right.
I'll never do it again.
On the other side of that is a better version of you. Yes. If you can course correct that. And I'm speaking from experience. Pride is my biggest problem. So, I have to slay that dragon, I don't have to slay it as much as I used to, but it used to be real bad.
Yeah.
And it's what I struggle with. So I hear that. This is the last question. It's my favorite question. Ask it to everybody. It's my ending question. Where do you see a movement of God right now?
I would say I see it among young people where they are, and by young people, I'm talking the 20s, where they are not relinquishing. They're tired of relinquishing themselves over to the mundane, and they are searching for something. They're finding it, and they're not finding it in the, it's not the mega church and things like that they're looking for. Like, it's true relationship. And sometimes we can, I have missed that kind of undertone that's happening because of all the noise, media and social. But you're talking about a generation they're rejecting social media. They're kind of, they're really in pursuit of other things. And in that pursuit, they are finding Christ. And I think that is a beautiful thing in a country that it's chaotic.
At best.
at best. And I think there's a movement happening within the household, within the family. Like people are reverting back to, like, I don't want other people managing my home.
Mhm.
I don't want other people I don't want corporations telling me what my children can watch and what my children should like whatever, it's just like, wait a minute, time out. Like, time out. And I think when things like that happen, we will, those who are non-believers will find Christ in that. And those who are believers, Christ will be amplified in that.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a beautiful thing.
Yep.
If we turn off the TV and we really focus in on paying attention to what's happening, it's like, there's a budding happening here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I've really felt that a lot just in the perspective of having a big kid, because that happens real fast. And, he was about to be a senior officially, and he'll graduate next year. And just the perspective that I have on that's like, okay, listen, like phones down, family dinner, like I need to see your face. I need to know what's going on in your life. Like, let's talk about what's going on in my life. Let's talk about how I'm handling it. Like, here's this problem. How are we doing? Like, I think there's so much personal revival in the family. There's so much potential for some Jesus, for some connecting, for some good, true relationship, because I think we forgot and lost how to like have an actual relationship because it's been so technology driven.
And transactional.
Yes.
And people are, that's not going to work. And so with my kids, I have a rule that I've had since they were little, where you can tell me anything and I won't react.
Mm-hmm.
You could get in trouble, but I'm not going to react. And because of that, they tell me a lot, and it gives a lot of opportunity to minister to them in non-obvious ways, and for them to minister to me in non-obvious ways.
Yeah. We have something very similar going on with our big kid, and it's tricky.
Yeah.
It's tricky, but you know what? I got to practice it this weekend right there in front of his friends. And I thought, this is it. Like, this is it. And it's also very mimicking to our relationship with God, because I can tell God anything and he's like, oh, baby. Yeah.
You're like, okay.
Hear ya. Let's work it. Let's work
it out. You're going to have to course correct here. That actually is not acceptable. So thank you for telling me. We will reconvene later after I pull myself together, because I'm not God. So I gotta, I'm a single mom. So I gotta
need a minute.
I need a minute, and then, I'll come back. But I think just the households are shifting. My hope is that people don't take what's happening in their homes and try to tell other people how to apply it to their homes.
Mm-hmm.
We gotta back up off of that one.
That's hard.
Which one?
Oh, yes. Because I think it goes back to like pride and I know best and but like,
I'm like,
it's not working for you, but I'm gonna trust the Jesus in you, and you're gonna do your thing, and I'm gonna be here to help and listen and whatever. But yeah.
People are surprised that I'm a mother because I don't post about my kids a lot. Mm-hmm. And then, it comes well, do you have any advice on it? I'm like, I mean, I can tell you what worked for me, but what I'm not going to do is start telling other people how to run their home.
Woo!
Woo! Hey now!
Hey
now!
It's getting hot.
Woo! Woo! Okay, stepped on some toes.
And that's where we're going to end too. We're just going to, there it is. And here we go. So tell everyone, what are you working on right now? What's coming up? What can they be connecting with you on? I know we'll drop your social medias and the thing,
websites and
all the things, but like genuinely, what's God got you working on? What's going on in the background?
I'm shifting into a season of where I'm going to step into speaking, kind of actually going out and doing that. I do it a lot with businesses, but I believe that where I'm been is for women of God. And so my website's going to change a little bit where I'll have an actual speaker page. You know, I've did it in the past. I know I've done it for you a couple of times. But I think that that is something that I'm actively working on in the background right now. Doing some writing stuff, about to revamp Jesus Led Bible Fed. I had too much going on. I don't have a problem with pushing pause on projects. So I had pushed pause on Jesus Led Bible Fed. And so now I'm going to really pick that up here in the next couple of weeks. And but the speaking and conferences and not just doing stuff with Periscope for organizations, which is what I've been doing, but doing it for women of God.
Yes.
Doing it for women of God. She's like, yes, do it.
Yes.
Do it.
I mean, yes, that's what I'm for that. And I've seen that work in you and I'm excited about that. So
Me
great.
off the cuff, no notes.
Yes. That's my favorite. My actual favorite, my favorite version.
Just preaching at conferences and with no notes. Just like,
That's all right though. Because yes, we could keep going, but yes. Okay. So we'll drop all the things in the show notes, you guys. Thank you so much, friend, for being here and
thank you for having me.
Time with us. Time is a precious commodity. And so I'm just so glad that you chose to spend some of your time with us today. So
thank you for having me.
Hey, you guys, I'll check you on the next episode of Not Your Mama's Bible Study. You guys, if you like this, hey, share it with a friend. Like that's a great way to give them some great sisterly advice that was offered here. Share it with one of your friends, you guys. And until then, I will